Alright friends, I am back with the third of 5 videos teaching you how to get the most out of Ableton Live Lite, get around that 8-track limit, and save yourself a little bit of cha-chang-chang, some cashola. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Today we are talking about automation. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get into it. I have an instrument rack open. I've already kind of showed you how to use the instrument rack. Now, what I've done today is I did not add 3 similarly sounding instruments. I added 3 completely different instruments because I'm going to show you this kind of shortcut hack to get around this 8-track limit. There is one caveat though that I want to say now before we get into it later. I can only play one of these instruments at a time, or I guess I could play 2 of these instruments at a time, 3 of these instruments at a time, but I can only play the same MIDI notes with that. And I guess I'll have to explain that a little bit later, but you can only use those same MIDI notes for it. So if I was going to play 2 different melodies, I can't play them at the same time using those 2 different instruments. And we'll kind of get into that in just a second. So I have all 3 of these loaded up, and then I just have a very simple MIDI clip that I added in. We got C, E, G, B, right? Very simple, kept it simple because I kind of want to show you more about automation than melodies and all that. So I'm going to switch over to arrangement view. Now I've added 3 of these in here. Since we're talking about automation today, we need to click on this little double arrow button, which is automation mode, right? You're going to see that down there at the bottom for automation mode in the little corner of your screen, the bottom left-hand corner. So we're going to click that now. It defaults to mix speaker on. So maybe you want to turn it on, you want to turn it off. Now, if we're trying to turn on and off one of these instruments, we're going to click on this instrument, right? I click on the instrument. Now I want to click on this little yellow dot. Now it's going to change it. If you see up here, right in this little corner, it's going to say instrument rack interplanetary trip pad, right? And then device on. Now I can also work on any of the filters, any macros that I've added, right? My chain selector, I can freak the volume on it, right? But we're going to go with device on, device off. So right now device is on. If I move it, the device is still automated to on. Right now I can put this and then it's off. So for this section of the song, I'm only playing what I have down here, Miami pluck and block minor brass, all right? So now I'm playing only 2 sounds at a time. If you can see, there's no volume coming into this interplanetary trip pad. Now, this is kind of tricky. You're gonna have to stick with me, and you're gonna have to keep this all together in your own mind if you're trying to do this, because it does get a little bit tricky because you're automating so many different things. If it helps, you can press this little plus button. So let's maybe switch our instrument. Let's go to Miami pluck. All right, now I'm going to press this pluck. What this is going to do is going to show me my automation in another lane. And I think it kind of helps you to see all the things that you have automated. I can automate it. I can also click on this interplanetary trip pad, press plus, and now I can kind of see where everything is automated at. So for this top, I have, again, it gets tricky and you kind of got to keep it in your mind. I have Miami pluck and block minor playing. What I'm going to try to do is make it so that only one instrument is playing each one of these clips, but I'm still only using one track. So I'm going to turn interplanetary device and Miami pluck off. Then I'm going to go to this block brass minor, right? And then this is going to stay on. So, a little bit tricky, right? If you're trying to work 3 different instruments but still keep them on the same track, right? It's going to be tricky because you're using automation and it's going to get confusing. So you're going to have to keep it together in your mind. But it is a hack, especially if you're working with MIDI, and it's also, you can use this with audio too, which is just a little bit easier with audio. You don't have to automate anything. You're just putting audio clips on, the same audio track. But with MIDI, we can work around it. So if I wanted a saxophone and I wanted a piano, on my song, but I'm like, I don't have enough tracks for that. I can put both a saxophone and a piano right down here in my instrument rack and kind of automate it so that I have the piano playing at one part of the song, then the saxophone playing at another part, and I'm only using one track. So if you see, right now I have only block minor brass playing. Now this time I have all three of them playing, but I'm going to have to automate that. So let's say I want Interplanetary Device to play, right, only by itself. Now this one is Miami Pluck. So if you see, as I play through this, right, block minor brass. Then if I click over here, I only got Interplanetary Trip playing. Now I only got Miami Pluck playing. Now this is a little bit hard with the instruments that I picked because there's a little bit of a delay on them, right? So you're going to hear that tail. I'm also probably in my track not going to have them playing right after another. You know, I would have to figure that out on my own. And then you're thinking right now, right? Okay, well, if you have these three different instruments, well, how are you going to EQ them all? Well, if you watch the instrument rack video, you can see that I can drop an EQ, right? Let's just take our, oops, I'm looking at plugins, my bad. EQ3, right? Because we don't have an EQ8 in here, but if you want to, you can use your own EQ, right? I can drop it right here. So now I'm EQing Miami Pluck, right? I can EQ block minor brass, and I can, oops, I don't know why I have that already over there, and I can EQ Interplanetary Trip. So I can still, oh, that's because I added it to the side, whoops. Right, I can still EQ each one of these songs so that they fit into my track and that they're still mixing well, but I'm also kind of getting around that by them all playing at different times in my song. Now this is kind of what I'm talking about, where you're not playing two different melodies on two different instruments, so I can't really necessarily layer my saxophone over my piano if I'm using this instrument rack method with automation. But this is a good way if you have two different elements in a song. Maybe you have this melody at the beginning, and then you kind of have this bridge melody that comes in that's a completely different instrument, and you don't want to use two different tracks. You can use automation to get around that, and you don't have to worry about them not EQing correctly because you're using the instrument rack and you're dropping that EQ straight to that instrument specifically. Right, now that's what I think is pretty cool about the instrument rack. Now, let's say I want to use automation to make things sound cool. So I'm going to I just deleted a bunch of them, right? I think one of the coolest things about automation is automating cool effects onto your sounds. I think it's kind of hard to really work around that 8-track limit and try to make sounds sound cool, but also add in variation. I think what happens sometimes with that 8-track limit is you kind of get stuck trying to add in a little bit of variation and, you know, give it that rise and flow, take that listener on the journey, because, you know, you don't want to keep playing I don't know why I keep picking saxophone, but for some reason saxophone's stuck in my head today. Keep playing the saxophone over and over, and even if it is different melodies, the listener wants something new to their ear. So what we can do with automation that's kind of cool, right? I just have this Miami Pluck. Now I can take a plugin that I have. I'm going to take a free plugin that I like because, you know, we're trying to save money here. So this is Cymatics Origin. It's kind of like a lo-fi tape emulator sound. And I can kind of, I'm going to loop this so that I don't have to keep, you know, going back to start it. I can kind of find something, I think that worked, that sounds cool, that I like, that changes the sound and kind of gives it this, you know, different feel and this different vibe, but you're still using the same instrument. So maybe I like this rusty radio. You know, it sounds a little trippy, spacey, right? Just like we did before when we're clicking on this little yellow device on, device off. If I click on it, you're going to see right up at the top, Cymatics origin device on. So now I can automate it to go on and turn the sound. Now I'm still using the same MIDI notes, right? So, you know, it's not that much variation, but I can totally change my melody. I can play something completely different. I can play something completely different, and when I'm using that rusty radio, it's going to give it a totally different vibe, a totally different feel. So those are kind of two ways that we can really use automation, and there's hundreds of ways, you know, to use automation. You can automate so many different things. I think what's cool, and I'm sure other DAWs do this, but I like that Ableton, I click on something, and then I can already automate it over here. So maybe I don't want to automate a whole device. Maybe I want to automate any of those parameters of the device. Maybe I want to automate my resample frequency, right? Maybe I want to change it up and down and up and down and move it around. I can use automation to do that. And that adds a lot of variation. It adds a lot of punch and switch up and kind of gives your song this beginning, middle, end. And you're still working within your 8-track limit. So I kind of wanted to focus on those two things today. So 2 things we kind of went through. Number 1 is you can use several instruments on one track by automating the device on and off. You're still able to use the EQ with that, and you can use whatever EQ you want, right? You can use whatever EQ plugin you want, as long as we're sticking with that instrument rack, but we won't necessarily be able to play 2 of those sounds with 2 different melodies at the same time. And then the second thing we went through today is kind of automating effects to create a little bit of variation in our track while still using only that one track and still only using one instrument. So if you like these videos, you can like, comment, or subscribe, as they say. And if you didn't, I'm surprised you even watched this far. Number 4, coming soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, drop them down below, or maybe something that you know that I don't know. You know, I always like to learn. Yeah, let me know. And goodbye. Love you.